down is kind of sketchy.
No.
Line.
I'm down. So I'm gonna start. Okay. Good morning. Thank you, and welcome here. I'm going to turn over this meeting to Commissioner Eckers here in a second. You can see me, but I just wanted to let you know, restrooms are around the side and walk from the side doors here. The restroom there, kitchen, water, things, if anything goes down, we don't know. But thank you for coming, and we welcome you here. Thank you. Appreciate that. Welcome. I'd like to welcome the Hillsborough County Commission. That was just a question over here. I've seen Les twice now. We've been here. I haven't had any. I like to say we're going to go around and introduce folks around this table, those of us who are here, and then we'll so start right there. Good morning, everyone. My name is City Council member Dave Eggers, Pinellas County Commissioner.
Commissioner Catherine Starkey, Pasco County Commissioner, and
Commissioner Jeff Harlow, Pasco County.
Matt Murphy, Deputy Mayor, People Richie,
Florida Department.
It's not that commissioner, but I don't know. Yes, we are not doing any recently. Show up at Pasco.
White House.
David Allen, Assistant County Administrator with Development Services at Pasco County.
Commissioner Seth Wakeman is online. Commissioner Wakeman, Pasco NPO, Pasco Commissioner. I don't know if you have been.
I see no other board members online.
Just one. All right, Seth, welcome. We jumped into approval of September meeting summary. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
I skipped over public comment. My apologies. On to item 3, approval of the major general transportation priority adjustment. Or not.
Sarah Caper with the Hillsborough TPO stepping in for Chelsea since her voice is struggling a little bit this morning. Let me just pull it up. Okay, so every year we develop our regional priorities, and these are major projects that advance the regional long-range transportation plan. Projects recently that were completed because of our collective support include the Gateway Expressway, the Sunrunner Bus Rapid Transit, and the I-75 interchange at Big Bend Road. And you can see here on the slide and in your agenda packet, projects that were recently funded because of our collective support include phases 1 and 2 of the West Shore Interchange, the I-275 safety and operational improvements, and the downtown I-4 interchange, Central Polk Parkway segments 1 and 2, County Road 557 from US 1792 to I-4, I-275 express lanes from 38th Avenue North to 4th Street, I-4 from west of US 27 to County Road 532, I-4 State Road 33 interchange reconstruction, and the Hart Heavy Maintenance Facility Phase 1. Here's a list of the unfunded priorities. The I-75 interchange at Gibsonton, the Regional Rapid Transit in the I-275 corridor, State Road 54 US 41 intersection, US 41 from State Road 44 to State Road 200, the DeSoto Bridge replacement, I-275 express lanes from I-375 to 38th Avenue North, the Bradenton Palmetto Connector, replacement of Hart's Heavy Maintenance Facility Phase 2, the Regional Passenger Rail Transit connection between Tampa and Orlando, Florida Tampa Bus Rapid Transit Project, the Pasco Hernando County Line Road Project, and State Road 60 from County Road 630 to US 441. And you can see here a map of some of the projects and their status. The next steps, we're going to be asking for action from you this morning, and then after at the SCTPA meeting, we'll be asking for action as well, and then transmit these priorities to the MPOs and to FDOT. There are no major changes this year on the list, and I would be happy, along with the executive directors, to take any questions.
Aye.
Thank you. Yes. Good morning again. I'm just going to introduce this item and turn it over to Todd Brower with White House Group, who is our consultant working on this. I do want to thank everyone who attended the principals workshop on November 14th, and we'll have some information on that workshop in the slides as well as next steps and an ask of you to help us continue with this effort. So with that, I'll turn it over to Todd.
Thank you, Sarah. Ooh, I got one of those voices. I better step back a little bit. It's really a joy to be here. And this is my second update that I'll be giving you. I gave you an update back in September. And as a reminder, we literally just got started with this. So the kickoff meeting happened in late August. Oh, and I better make sure I know how to. Chelsea, how do I advance it? Do I just do this? There we go. Okay. Thank you. But we started in late August. And so when we gave you the update in September, that was really just saying, hey, guess what? We're getting started. Here's what we're going to be doing. And primarily, just as Sarah had mentioned, we were announcing that we had a principals workshop, that we wanted to get people together that would be decision makers that can influence that decision, who also might be signers of an interlocal agreement should one occur as partner cities. That was the big announcement that we had then. We've actually accomplished a lot since we've had that first meeting. So I'm happy to give you a report today. Primarily, I'm going to be focusing on the results of the principals workshop, but I do want you to know that we did do a lot of other efforts that was in between that. So we completed, gosh, sorry, I know my voice carries. We completed, I'll do this, a employee survey, because one of the questions that we wanted to ask is, essentially, what would be the downstream issues? What do we need to be aware of from an employee standpoint? Because we're looking at 3 different MPOs, they're county employees with 3 different counties. What does it look like from their perspective? To really understand the work that they do each day, how their feelings are related to it, what they'd like to see if a merged MPO occurs, what do they see as the risks, what do they see as the challenges? So we really get the perspective of the individuals that are on the ground doing the work day to day. Those individuals also worked with us to get us a lot of data. So we collected data on not just staffing, but also on how are they funded, their agreements that you have in place, your committees, essentially the operations that occur with each one of the MPOs. So we've collected that data, we've collated it, we've put it together in summaries. And at the end of my presentation, you'll see a quick QR code to go to the website. We've been publishing everything as we go along. Some things are still in drafts, as I said. It's been 3 months, but we've really been able to get a lot accomplished at that point. We're now taking that information that we've collated, and we're going to be doing a comparison memorandum. So we expect that to be done, the heavy lifting, done before the end of this year, and then probably published sometime early January as well. So that will essentially say, this is how they're different. Those are the risks. These are the opportunities that you have should you merge the three MPOs together. At the same time, we had the workshop, which again is going to be the focus of this presentation, what came out of that, the attendance, what were the thoughts, and really trying to understand too, what's the needle of the sentiment related to merging the MPOs? Did that change at all as we went through it? At the same time too, we've also been working with our legal team to look at the TMAs, what came out of this group in saying, okay, what does the apportionment look like? So we've been doing a legal review, bringing together all the information, and really strengthening and building on the work that you've already created to ensure that we're going to add to that. As you guys were focusing, again, this group's been working on it for the last couple of years. You developed that scope. You signed off on the scope. We wanted to strengthen that with some educational materials as well. So two of the areas that we wanted to make sure that we got out right out of the gate was the legal framework, essentially laying out all the statutes, both federal and state, that govern a redesignation of an MPO. So there is a fact sheet that lays out every statute that applies to any kind of redesignation. At the same time, we're starting to get different questions too. As the scope has progressed, we're starting to see movement. We're talking with people. So we're doing kind of an FAQ as to some of the things that we're hearing and answering those back. So that will continue to get updated as we go along. In fact, our legal team is looking at the legal framework and seeing if there's anything that we need to add after the workshop. So a lot of these things can be works in progress, but we're always trying to move to where you have the transparency and the information available to you so you can help make those good decisions. As far as how we've progressed on the scope, the upper part that you see in purple are the things that we've come together on. The big thing was the principals workshop that we had November 14th on a Friday. It was well attended. So we invited about 240 elected officials. So we invited all the administrators as well as all the elected officials for all the cities in all three counties. We ended up having roughly about 50 people that attended the meeting. We grouped them together, and we'll get into a little bit of that related to it. But the important part of that was for us as a team, we wanted to hear initially what the thoughts were about not just the TMA apportionment, but what were their thoughts in general about that apportionment? And more importantly, too, like how would they like to see that operate? I think one of the critical pieces that we heard again and again from particularly people that attended the workshop was, what is the final result of this? And we do use some mitigated speech in saying, hey, this isn't definite. This is something that gets voted on. It's not sure that a merged MPO would happen, but we want to do everything we can to see where are there alignments to get it to where I'll call get to yes. But the important question that came up was essentially, what did those deliverables look like? And our big focus on phase one, which goes through February, the way we've set up the scope, and this was a suggestion that came out of this group here, is why don't we divide up the scope into a phase one and phase two, so that way we have a chance to kind of do some forensics, see how things are going. Is there a reason to go forward? Because importantly, this job isn't to actually get an ILA to get them to vote on the creation of an MPO, because once that happens, once you have the four bodies that are required to create the MPO, which are the three county commissions, as well as the city of Tampa is the largest city within the region, you have 6 months to actually get it operating. So this effort is to essentially get to, can you get to a yes and then get to that operation? But importantly, it's not just about the apportionment side of it, though, because that hits on what becomes really the next phase of it. If you can get to a yes, it's that board that gets created that does the bylaws, that does the service offerings, that does the funding. That's what makes this a tricky process, is because we're looking at it from an apportionment standpoint, but we don't actually know who the board is. And by federal law, when you relate to the MPO, you're actually relating it to the board members, not the organization, the board itself. They set the policy. So we're trying to be creative in the sense of what are the general things that need to go into bylaws, as well as service offering and a funding plan to make sure that that operation is occurring. But you're doing that before you actually have a board in place to answer those questions. But again, you're only given 6 months once an ILA is completed to be able to get that done. So this is generally where we're at. We're now looking at the legal agreements, which are the apportionment plan, the bylaws, the service offerings, and the funding plan, essentially making sure that we're hitting all the legal requirements related to that and getting all those things flushed out. So once we had the principals workshop, the idea of it was not to just generate ideas, but to really get a barometer of where people were at on that. So as part of the effort, when we sent out the RSVPs, many of you will notice we asked you to say, hey, would you be willing to take a survey and tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are before going into the principals workshop about merging the three MPOs. I will say that when we asked what the general sentiment was as to yes or no, 54% of those that took the survey, and again, that's not everybody that went to it, but about half of them, about 23 people took the survey, said no, they weren't necessarily in support and they weren't sure how it would even get there. So towards the end of the presentation, I want to bring up what the general sentiment was as we moved along through that process. But we had a starting point to really try to understand because you're representing the three MPOs here, what is it that those MPOs are offering you that you see as the most important? And overwhelmingly, we're seeing it's that regionalism. It's that thought of how do you bring, just as Sarah completed the last effort, how do you bring projects that cover multiple counties and make sure that they actually get funded, they get built, and they get moved along? That was a big part of it. But it wasn't small to say that there are the advocacy of other priorities. MPOs do other things than just doing the MTP and the TIP. So there was some conversation about, hey, there's other things that MPOs do that broaden our community, that make connections. We know Pinellas has their land use connection to transportation. Pasco is looking at economic development. So all of these MPOs are really relating the work that they do with transportation with other goals of the county. So we had to be aware of thinking of it from a transportation standpoint, and if there's a merge, what would an independent MPO look like? We also wanted to understand the relationship that this MPO would have with those that provide transportation. And I say this all the time as it relates to MPOs, because MPOs neither own nor operate anything. They're really collaborative. When they came forth in the 1970s, they used to be called coordinating councils. The idea was to bring all of these agencies together to see if we could find a path to help improve mobility and accessibility. So we wanted to see what was that relationship going to look like relative to that. And you'll see overwhelmingly we ranked them 1 through 6. They're wanting to see a relationship in which there's some real pass-through between the agencies and how the MPOs would react with them, to be able to move forward, to make sure that there's a voice, and importantly, to make sure that there's a level of equity when it came to decision-making. So the findings itself, we broke them up, all the attendees, into 3 different groups. The principals, so those are, again, when we talk about the principals, we're talking about the 4 bodies that are required to redesignate the MPO into a 3-county entity. And again, that is the 3 county commissions, as well as the largest city, and that's the Council of Tampa, City of Tampa. So we grouped them together to generate some ideas to really say, and the intent of this was to say as many principals as we can get in a room, let's get them in a room and see what happens. Let's see what the barometer is. Let's see where the points of negotiation are, because ultimately that's what that first process is to get to an ILA is really a negotiation. Generally, they thought that on the principals side that state law requires it to be, you have to have a board of at least 5, but no more than 25. Now, again, that's state law, that's not federal law. There are plenty of boards that are larger. You look at Philadelphia, you look at St. Louis, you look at San Francisco, they have much larger boards. And there's a lot of different ways that you can include voting within that. But there was a comfort level with that. And I had mentioned to several people that becomes part of that negotiation too, is that if they want a larger board, that's something to ask the legislature to consider if that's something that's important to those principals. Because again, those principals are required, all 4 of them, to agree in a simple majority to move forward with this. There was some talk about a supermajority voting, again, because there's that feeling of we want some equity, but we also don't want to be run over if we're a smaller city, or if we're a city that just stands alone and we're greatly impacted by a project. There was concerns about that, as well as the idea of, from a negotiation, can we split these funds as a 50-50 towards transit and roadway? So it was a very vigorous conversation. It was a very good conversation, but it was the start of a conversation. It definitely wasn't the end of a conversation. And I think every one of the principals that came out of there said the same thing, is this is really a start. From the partner city standpoint, they were really looking at it from, hey, how do we engage? We're fine with the proportionate relative to population, but what about the small cities? Is there some opportunities? And they really came up with some great ideas to have a rotating essentially, once the board got applied, that as part of the bylaws, it would be included as a committee of small cities that would elect one of their members. And again, it was an idea, elect one of their members that would serve as a voting member on the board, and there would be a rotation that would go through it. So they were really generating a lot of ideas about how do we make sure that the small city voices are recognized. The influencers really started focusing on what about veto? What about supermajority? Again, the equity side of it. And I think those voices are super important to understand. If you're on the outside, on the initial ILA looking in, how do you make sure that your voice is heard related to that? So generally, these were the topics that were talked about. Again, nothing was binding, nothing was saying that you had to do it, but it was really being able to finally get everybody in the room together and have that conversation. So we concluded then with a poll, and we asked the question, based on today, what's your current assessment on the path forward? And I'm happy to state that it would appear at that time the needle moved slightly. The overall sentiment was positive. 83% of those that took the survey. So again, we had roughly 50 people that attended, 41 that took the initial survey, 30 that ended and stayed and took this survey. Of those individuals, 73% were cautiously optimistic. We had a small section that was strongly convinced and a small group that was skeptical. So there was nobody that just said absolutely not, but there's definitely some hesitation about how do we get to this? Because again, it's a tough negotiation. And in particular, I want to keep bringing up the idea that the struggle with this is there's a process that takes place. And I'm not saying that we're putting the cart before the horse, but we're putting the cart a little bit before the horse. It's hard to talk about bylaws and what an MPO does when the MPO as defined by federal law is the board and there is no board. So we're trying to be creative in saying what's a menu of options that we can give a board should it occur to make sure that they could set up something that is hearing what we're getting from everybody else. So when we think about next steps and options, the way we're looking at it is coming out of the principals workshop. We took that information about small cities. How would one do that? What would apply to bylaws? What would apply to an ILA? How many people would actually sign off on the ILA? As well as making sure that are there opportunities for negotiation? How would that look like? And then leading to around the first of the year, we'd like to be able to really, and again, it's a request, not that anybody has to do anything, but request that the principals vote in some level of support generally with what an ILA would look like. And we're really seeing that as a barometer check to see, does this thing have any legs? Because again, because we don't even know what the vote is. Is it 1-3? Is it 2-2? Is it 4-0, 0-4? We don't know where the standing is. Because again, this is one of the first times, and I've really got to commend Sarah, our project manager, and everybody who attended really got engaged in this process. And we're making sure that everybody could be welcome. Because getting in a room is how we're going to get this done, is having that conversation and going, what does it take to get to yes? It doesn't mean you have to, but what would it take to do that? So if we have a merger that's supported, it would seem to give us some empirical evidence to say, yeah, phase 2 makes sense to move forward. How do we look at board compensation, roles and responsibility? Again, never going to the point where we're saying, hey, vote on the ILA. It's just getting it ready so it's teed up to do so. But what if it's not supported? What if the worst case scenario, all 4 bodies vote or they don't vote, which is a vote of itself. But if they don't vote or they vote against it, what's our solution, right? Because it's not that nothing can happen. So we're looking at is there other mechanisms that could help achieve regional goals, which is something what this group does, that might be able to strengthen that. So that way it's not just saying, oh, I guess it's dead, let's move on. Because as you guys are aware from the last conversation that we've had together, this has been a conversation for 30 years. You guys have been working on it for the last couple of years. So it's not an easy task to take hold of. So we're looking at any kind of opportunities there. So I still want to encourage you, how you can help is please encourage the principals to attend your next meeting on February 20th. Because what we'd like to do is to see if we can get them in a room again. Because again, everybody that left that workshop said this was the beginning of the conversation, definitely not the end of the conversation. And I couldn't agree more. But then also I'd love help in identifying any points of negotiation that you can see. One of the things that I really liked coming out of the workshop was that you were getting that. You were getting ideas to say, how could you get to yes? What would you need to see for me to support this? And many were like, well, what about doing a policy on so much money going towards transit versus roadway? There was some real creativity happening there. And so I'd ask this group, if you've got ideas, we're all ears. But then at the same point, if it's not supported, any other kind of mechanisms that you could think of that could achieve those regional goals as you go along. So that's my update on what we've created over the last 3 months. Again, moving forward, we're going to be hosting, or not hosting, but we'll be here for the meeting at your next meeting for February 20th to continue that conversation, to hear your ideas. And then as we move into the new year, we want to be able to try to get something in front of those principals to say, hey, this is what we're looking for. So with that discussion or questions, I'm happy to serve.
Yeah, you said that TMA gets 20 February. And you run the legal conference.
We were not. Sarah?
You are not, and thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. We definitely can look at dates in February for this meeting. We do really want to try to have a TMA meeting in February, and we are planning on sending an invitation to the 3 county commissions in the city of Tampa to specifically attend. So we'll get with the different staffs to see when we could do that in February. The reason why February is so important is that we would like to look at phase 1 concluding. It's supposed to conclude in February. We plan on extending that, but we do want to conclude phase 1 in the spring so that we can do phase 2 if it's needed and meet our contractual obligations.
We should start with South. Very important.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely want you there. We'll look at another date in February. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Rundown. I'll be as blunt as I was in our SCTPA meeting. This was the most confusing, complicated workshop I've ever been. It made no sense. The screens were hard to follow. The questions were hard to follow. And it generally felt sort of like we were school children. That was uncomfortable as well. So really, we cannot be talking in legal reviews if we want to solve this problem. Like I even had trouble following this language. It really just means we need to break it down to basic English. And I love the principal conversation with no, we really had a good conversation, but it isn't distilled really in this. This is I find this very difficult. That I don't feel like that's what came out of this. I also believe that this is a good starting point. Unfortunately, we just had a meeting on Wednesday. And county commission basically was like, well, the airport on there, we're out. And I was like, why are you coming? We here. So I as the Tampa representative, share your frustration that they do not attend this meeting. I think that's unfortunate. We're only going to get somewhere, get someone here to that very thing. But for me personally, I am very far away from a vote because I really believe that this shouldn't be a highly contested thing. We've got a mandate that we all get through. I know it's impossible to mandate an elected to get in the room, but there's really no other way. That principals workshop, we got the furthest that we've ever gotten. That was great. I think we need to get the county commissioners and all of the city of Tampa representatives in a room and hash it out. And if you want to go forward, because right now I can't even predict how the city of Tampa would vote. I would vote no if it votes down because I don't think people and I don't understand what's going on. I'm just this is very important. But like our other legislators, we have a little things on our plate. This is not top thing for me right now. So I need breakdowns. I need language that's simple and understandable. I need to take something out of it. I just need the high points that just what's going on, what we can do, what our points are. And I'm absolutely, like I said, I was thrilled with the conversation with principals. I want to continue that, but there's no way we can do it. I don't feel like we can do that comfortable vote in January or February. I know that messes up the timeline, but that is just not something I feel comfortable with. And I really do want to get my council members involved, and I think that the majority clearly view the importance. And I tried to get it, but I only had the day before's notice to really push out to them, because they were already scheduled. So I think, y'all need to do the work of reaching out to each individual elected official, speak to them, update them on this, and talk about the importance of them being there for their constituents.
Definitely heard and noted, and we welcome that feedback and any other feedback from those here or your colleagues. We really need, the more you share with us about what worked, what didn't work, what you're looking to see in those discussions would really help us make the best environment to continue those. And we have already looked at pushing back our request for the vote to as late as we can. That's a discussion we can have in February as well, of why we have those timelines and if, what the pros and cons are of changing those.
And if I may, I'd also like to say, to update you, we heard you loud and clear. We're actually working on a document that we're translating the legalese into everyday speak. So we're about a quarter of the way through it. So yeah, we'll be posting that soon. So we did hear you. Mhm.
To me, that's been the element for a year at least, if not more. Kind of heading towards some kind of discussion. And for me, it was frustrating. It was good. It was all over. That's a lot of emotion put out on the table. We had one person. There was a pathway, maybe. Yeah, I'm not getting any more than that. Pretty sure our council. That's a good thing. That's something to build on. The other council person wasn't quite as optimistic, but if we don't have those groups, care about scheduling, care about anything else, I care about having those discussions, because whether there's an issue between the county commission and our MPO or city of Tampa and their TPOs, I mean, those are issues too that are important. And to your point about negotiation, it was really all about, and if we have the folks that are those folks have been, I'm not saying that the other folks aren't important also. Get out on the end and work our way back a little bit. And we can still work this way as well. I think some of the other groups talking at the table, but if we can get out at the end and see that light, then open up the conversation for everything much easier. Because every conversation we have is going to have that in the back of it. And so I just think, again, I share your optimism about the results of the discussion. So this is the kind of conversation that I thought we dealt a lot more. We have council, we have commissioners on our. I don't want to 7-0 vote. We're not. We have a lot of conversation on my and I know city cap. City cap and the TPO is built for us. So we got to get it out there. That's really important part of it. I think when you never put up whatever it's going to be out there, you're going to say that we're going to want ourselves to do something that those groups understand. I don't think it's going to apply. You can put it up and these parameters of this initial group set up. To give you an idea to get more people involved too, but primary workshops together. We put all of them together, scheduled the same day, maybe a little bit afterward, and you kind of combine it, and you invite the cities and you take that for everyone to get there. That may be the best time to get everybody together.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. We have reached out to see if that is possible. We're still waiting on an answer, and I welcome if you have contacts or your directors have contacts. We welcome any help getting that to happen. Thank you.
Probably the most difficult job of all, getting everybody together.
Yes.
When my age trying to set up a meeting, what the three people is like.
Yes.
I get it. But we have to do it. That, to me, that's a failure. I was encouraged that the discussion we had at a really granular level and emotional and, you know, kind of big picture and back and forth.
Well, I want to say, I also thought we had our best conversation ever, Tibarda, whatever, at the principals workshop, that was wonderful ability for us. I also was going to suggest that we have this Wright County.
It's a round table, I think.
And I've been asked for a while to have that city gym. I think that we should look at a combined TMA, Wright County, and just make it a lot of date. And I really want to have a big partnership to become. I've been hearing from some of the leaders of the business community in Tampa Bay that they're getting very frustrated too. And I just like one no one from Hillsborough's here. They're very frustrated. Maybe we have them, maybe not at the table, but invite them to come listen, and so they can help us. We have sunshine, so we can't go around, you know, advocating for one position or another. But I know this is very important to the business community. So I think that airport is really easy for everybody. This is not so easy for Pasco to come down here. So I think it's in an easy location, and we're just gonna have a big one. Right.
We've been having discussions. Never had them before. But those 10 counties are having really constructive conversation. Last week, we said that we want to have it at the very next meeting. Each state representative on that meeting. So to your point about, I don't even know that we need to have a regional. So, I mean, I'm not saying that we always have to get together and we're talking to each other, not like we did with that age. Now we're talking. You know, I'm not saying anything constructive, but the fact that we're talking, cities seem to be major cities have to get it. We recognize that, and so that's what we recognize that here. So, let's center around that. That's the spirit of what we're doing here, regional, and that's the leadership that the county that really have major cities right alongside.
I do feel that we need to come. I mean, 30 years, we have to do something. And I don't know if the election date, I don't know if November is an issue on this, I don't know why. But because nothing will hit the public, will hit the streets for years, even when we come together as people. It takes years to bring that one down. So, but I do think we need to, I would like to see us set a date and work really hard to get there. So sometimes, because we can't just keep talking in circles.
But if we're talking, so yeah. Then that date.
Yeah, it is.
Whatever that is. There.
I think the only money for it is important because as more information comes out and as things get discussed, we learn more and those of us who should involve the person might be really excited about it. It's time to go. That's good. That's good. Obviously, from my position, the very first thing was math is what it worked out. So my thing is, okay, how we but over the period of time, Tampa, I've also come to appreciate a lot of home houses, the fact that they don't want to go with they don't want to go with small and mixing something that, that's not right here. So I think I want to applaud those of us who here saying, I'm concerned that the number of the I'm concerned that number is received, and I'm concerned. I think that's the problem. I think the problem is that people are responding optimistically or the people who are really in it for us. And the people that we don't see are not taking a poll. I think a lot of them is a goal of everybody. And a lot of the people they're going to be we won't do this. And so I think if you poll all remember all that. And I will do what I can. But I'll try to we wind up at another. We can go back to the list and really abandon look at everything we did, and we came up with the real work. And so we did it. And I also they were not only alone, and I don't know if that's not very gratified to see the thing that they know not just win, but actually so that's the kind of conversation. More specifics about the organization. Good, I think this is huge goal, but just talking to a lot of people. There are people. Thank you. There are people on the Hillsborough TPO for them, at least today, if that were put before them for a vote and those two bodies were not included as voting members, that would be a deal breaker. That issue alone.
And I know that there are those in Pasco and maybe Pinellas also who are more hesitant on that. And, you know, I want to remind everybody that Hillsborough has pledged and is willing to sign the contract for this, that we would not stack that with elected officials from those boards to do exactly what Orlando does, which is to try to pad the voting composition of the board by putting elected officials on the, we would use staff like we do now in Hillsborough County. It's our belief, or at least I can't speak for the TPO, but I think the majority believes that those two entities are regional assets, critically important to transportation. But I also respect that there's other people who say, no, they're not elected officials. They shouldn't be on the board at all. But I think that's an issue that we need to get out there on the floor, and let's just talk through that thing, because I think that is a big sticking point. The allocation of the board seats beyond that, the small cities council, I think those are things that we need to hash out, but they're smaller. So I really think everybody's saying the same thing, and things are going up. We need to just get everybody in the room, and let's just, you know, that meeting you guys had, and I wasn't in that room, I was in the other room. I mean, it was contentious at times, but good came out of it. You got it all out there, and let's just duke it out. And I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you. And so I just have a question for this county meeting. How many county commissioners actually attend? Does everybody go?
Pretty well.
But how many Hillsborough people go, just on average? I'm just curious.
I was at if I can speak, I was at the last one. I invited everyone there to attend the principals workshop. If I remember correctly, and I could be slightly off, I believe every county commission had everyone there except for maybe about 2 per commission.
Okay, so about 5. That's pretty good. Okay. So for me, I think it needs to be a combination of open-ended and specifics. Right now, what we need to do, in my opinion, is reach out to each individual elected in this principals group. I would focus on education, and then put us all in a room. Because honestly, I think the best thing we did was get out our emotions first. And that's really important. And it's what I do with all my constituents. Most people are just mad and they just want to be heard. And I feel like once we all got heard, we were able to talk more about issues. So everyone talks fear, and then we talk actuals. And if we're not in a room together, that's not going to happen. But what we can do in the meantime to prepare for that room is to get some one-on-one meetings, to talk about the importance of this, to share the history that we've gone through. I think that's going to be paramount. I don't think we're going to get any further until you've sat down with each council member or commissioner to do that very thing in the principals group. So that would be my recommendation. Then I would get us all in a room. And even if all of us were in a room, I would also invite our attorneys, because our attorney would never allow us to do it without him being in the room. So, and then put us into like maybe some groups, different people, and then switch us around, and then come back as a large group. Because as 28 people, we're never going to get a word in edgewise. But if we can divide us up and then come together after we've all had that venting session, I think it will be more productive. I do have high hopes, because here's the thing. It does not matter if we end up voting yes or no on this. We have to figure out what comes next. So if it isn't this, we still have to do something. And I want that to be productive. I want us to have a way forward, even if it's not this. So I come out with extra questions every time I do this. So another thing that would be very helpful for me personally is to have a debrief session. I don't know if that's with our TPO, if that's with Dr. Wong for us, and for Mr. Blanton, for Pinellas, however it works. I do believe we need a debrief afterwards so that I can get my questions out and answered. Because again, this is not what we do. This is not our day-to-day priority. So I need to be I need it on my calendar to say, hey, let's debrief about this. And I have talked to Dr. Wong in passing about a few things, but for me, it would be really helpful because now my biggest question that came out for me was, I thought we were going to be merging money, but it turns out we're not merging money. And then so to me, I'm like, okay, what's the point then? So I have more in-depth questions that I need answered on the back end so I can be productive in the principals workshop. So thank you. Yes.
It's been, I want to go back to something that the mayor was speaking of. You know, I don't understand how people can have an opinion that they haven't educated themselves. And so if you're, I'm sorry, I'm a very blunt person. It's amazing I'm still in office. That's an opinion out of ignorance. And so if you're not here discussing the challenges, come on, why are you in office? So for me, it's not a deal breaker, the airport and the port. What I learned in the meeting, the principals meeting, is the sticking point that I think is going on is part of the distrust of what I learned, the Hillsborough Commission and the Tampa City Council, of what kind of priority would this money be going for? What type of transportation? I've always thought we were mostly talking about a transit solution. So that was interesting to me, that there may be some dissension on your TPO. There is not, as far as I know, dissension between my MPO and their, what do you call yourself? Ford Pinellas. Okay, and their MPO. And we have discussions, and I don't know if it matters here or not, that if this falls apart, we're going to merge. And I'm sorry, the Hernando County guy just left. And, you know, we'll just keep moving up, maybe. But that's sad, because we only have 2 connections from Pasco to Pinellas County. We have US 19 and we have East Lake Road. Basically, that's it. The Sun Coast, 75, Bruce B. Downs, Dale Mabry. Am I leaving any others out? Those are the big ones. Those are all our connections into Hillsborough. But I drove home last night coming from an all children's event. It took me an hour and a half to get from like Countryside Mall up to my house in Gulf Harbors. It was horrible. So we just got to keep moving on something. And if this falls apart, we want to, you know, merge with you guys.
I know we have 2 folks left.
Citrus County has arrived.
Okay, all right. So I think it's important that coming up, getting people in the room. Now, I will tell you that when the last meeting set up for this, I told my administrator I couldn't make it. Family trip, and wasn't going to make it. So we're lightly attended on our end. But again, sometimes schedules happen. And again, watching out for this here ahead of time is a good thing with the conference. So I think these tri-county workshops, which have been extremely productive and friendly. I mean, the discussions have been phenomenal. So I agree, Commissioner Regulus, that it's been a great thing for the region to get us all together. And I think if we get together with that, this should go tied. You could even make this the meeting to be, the topic is going to be straight transportation. And we can just deal with this issue and then just bring everybody else in the same room at the same time and go. And I think it would work very productively. What I think we need to do is to get the list of things that we're going to look at to set the parameters up, you know, the representation, et cetera. Put all those things in place and let's have the discussion right then and there. I think what needs to be happening is you're going to have to vote on one by one as we go. Whatever the document is at the end, I think local control is a lot better than having the state control it. And I think everyone here would feel better about that. If things change later on, so be it. It can be voted, but at least get them out one by one, discuss them, and go through it. I think we need data that would be helpful for those who don't understand. And frankly, no matter what happens, I want to see this come forward. However the voting goes, no matter what it is, I want to see the final document move, because if we're going to bring federal money in, it's going to help the region no matter where it goes. So there aren't any negatives to this whole thing going forward. because it's going to be a positive for cash flow to get everything else done. So with that, I think if you get some data to show how maybe the other regions that did this around the nation show how much extra money they got, what projects they got funded, they would have got funded otherwise, that may be helpful people to educate themselves to see what's going to happen.
Jack, we saw that at the meeting in Metro Plan Orlando. They got the federal money for their transit.
And just for edification purposes, when we wrote the study to the legislature about 2 years ago, we told them that we would merge July 1st, 2027, or find another mechanism as stated on slide 7. We are past the point of we tried, it's been 30 years, so we have to find another way. And I just wanted to make sure that point was clarified, because that education piece, I think we need to have that as a pillar and a building block, because sometimes we forget, we were all busy. So we need to go back and lay that foundation. And I absolutely agree, so we can build and move forward stronger and better.
Absolutely, well said. Thank you for your comments, both of you, and Commissioner Mariano, thank you. I mean, there's a real want to have to get this thing aired out and make sure that we do it right. And sometimes it's like the combination of details, education, and sometimes it's that open discussion. I think to be productive, I think we need both. The education's important. Lay that out, whether it's small groups, large groups, come back together. The framework that we have at the County Commission Summit that we put together is perfect. And it's just about each of those county administrators talking to their boards and saying, hey, I know you haven't shown up at a couple of the last TMA meetings, but we're going to have a tri-county summit that's going to talk exclusively, for the most part, about this topic. And get everybody there, because really that's what it's going to take. And then I can check the really optimistic box instead of yeah. I'm gonna try to be cautiously optimistic. But in any event, I thank you all for all of your comments and thoughts, and to be respectful of the next meeting. I know we don't really have the time. I think the Metro Plan Orlando visit was really good from what I heard, that those that were able to attend, some sitting around this table, they have a powerful person in the room, or a powerful group in the room, and yet they've still been able to make it work because they know the greater good for that area helps them as well. And I think that's the message that we heard basically. And we did have, I know, Councilwoman Hurtak, you went. Who else went to that? Okay, four. So four of our TMA folks were there too. So that's great. Anything on the peer exchange you want to mention?
Just that we had a peer exchange with the 2 other MPOs that have merged, one in Virginia, one in Texas, and it was very enlightening. There's some really important takeaways from that. So we'll be sure to bring those takeaways to the next discussion that we have. And I think we can center a little piece around that. Yeah.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn? Second, somewhere? Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, thank you all. Appreciate it. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. We'll see you next year.
Thank you very much. A lot to get through.